In the darkest moments of history, when the world seems to teeter on the brink of chaos, the most unexpected heroes can rise. Imagine a time when the very fabric of a nation was torn apart by war, famine, and political strife. This was the France of the 14th century, a land where the ruling class was so corrupt that even the common people, who had long suffered in silence, finally decided to take matters into their own hands. The story of France in the years following the Battle of Poitiers in 1356 is a tale of rebellion, violence, and the struggle for power. But it is also a story of ordinary people who dared to challenge the status quo. The Battle of Poitiers was a turning point in the 100 Years' War between England and France. On that fateful day, the French army, led by King Jean II, was decisively defeated by the English forces, commanded by the young Black Prince. Despite being outnumbered and fatigued, the English won the day thanks to the prince's strategic genius and the loyalty of his troops. The prince, known for his courage and cruelty, kept a close eye on the battle, making sure his orders were followed and his soldiers remained disciplined. He also had the advantage of knowing there was no possibility of retreat, which pushed his men to fight with all their might. When the dust settled, King Jean II was captured, and the French were left leaderless and demoralized. The defeat at Poitiers had far-reaching consequences. The French nobles, who had scattered after the battle, were more concerned with protecting their own lands than with rescuing their king. As the English marched south to Bordeaux with their royal prisoner, they looted the French camp, taking with them luxurious items like furred mantles, jewels, and illuminated books. The Black Prince, eager to secure his victory and prevent any rescue attempts, made no effort to join forces with his cousin, John of Lancaster. Instead, he focused on securing the ransom for the French king and the valuable prisoners he had captured. The capture of King Jean II was a significant blow to France, and it put the English in a strong negotiating position. However, despite the French negotiators being prisoners themselves, they were reluctant to accept the harsh terms proposed by the English. The winter passed with no agreement, and only a temporary truce was reached. In May 1357, the Black Prince finally took King Jean II to London, where he would remain a prisoner until a ransom could be negotiated. Meanwhile, in Paris, the Third Estate, which represented the common people, saw an opportunity to assert their power. The monarchy was in disarray, and the Dauphin, Charles, who was now the de facto ruler of France, was inexperienced and humiliated by the defeat at Poitiers. The summoning of the Estates General, a meeting of representatives from the three estates, the clergy, the nobility, and the commoners, provided the perfect platform for the Third Estate to voice their grievances and demand reforms. The Third Estate, led by the Provost of Merchants, Etienne Marcel, a wealthy draper and businessman, was determined to bring about change. Marcel and his supporters were tired of the royal government's corruption and mismanagement. They demanded the dismissal of the most corrupt royal councillors and the appointment of a new council of 28, which would include representatives from all three estates. They also demanded the release of Charles of Navarre, a powerful nobleman who had been imprisoned for his political ambitions and whose presence could be used to pressure the Dauphin. The Dauphin, despite his weak appearance, had a core of resistance and intelligence. He rejected the demands of the estates and ordered them to disperse. However, the Third Estate, led by Marcel, refused to back down. They continued to meet and listen to inflammatory speeches, such as those given by Robert Lecoq, a clergyman known for his eloquence and radical ideas. Lecoq, who had risen to prominence through his legal expertise, was a key figure in the reform movement and saw Charles of Navarre as a potential ally in his quest for power. The conflict between the Dauphin and the Third Estate was not just a struggle for power. It was also a reflection of the deep divisions within French society. The upper level of the Third Estate, consisting of merchants, manufacturers, and officials, had much in common with the nobility. They aspired to the same status and privileges, and many had already achieved a level of wealth and influence that rivaled that of the nobles. However, the lower classes, the workers and the poor, had little in common with their supposed leaders in the Third Estate. The wealthy bourgeois, like Marcel, were more interested in securing their own status and wealth than in addressing the needs of the common people. Paris, the center of this political storm, was a city of contrasts. It was a bustling metropolis with a population of around 75,000. divided into distinct neighborhoods based on trade and social status. The right bank of the Seine was the commercial and industrial heart of the city, while the left bank was dominated by the university. The city's streets were narrow and muddy, and the air was often thick with the stench of waste. Despite the squalor, Paris was a center of learning and culture, with a vibrant university and a thriving book trade. The provost of merchants, Etienne Marcel, governed the city from the Chatelet, a fortress that served as both a prison and the seat of municipal government. Marcel and his fellow magistrates were responsible for maintaining order, collecting taxes, and managing the city's affairs. However, their authority was constantly challenged by the unrest and dissatisfaction among the people. The city's social structure was complex and hierarchical. At the top were the nobles and the clergy, followed by the wealthy bourgeois, and at the bottom were the workers, the poor, and the destitute. Each class had its own interests and grievances, and the lines between them were often blurred. The wealthy bourgeois, who had risen through trade and commerce, were often resented by the nobles and the clergy, who saw them as upstarts who had no right to the power and influence they had gained. The situation in Paris came to a head in November 1356, when the Dauphin, fearing for his safety, left the city. The Standing Committee of the Estates General, led by Marcel, continued to meet and demand reforms. They were joined by Charles of Navarre, who had been released from prison and was eager to assert his own authority. The city was on the brink of revolution, and the Dauphin, now isolated and vulnerable, had to find a way to regain control. The conflict between the Dauphin and the Third Estate was not just a political struggle. It was a battle for the soul of France. The common people, long oppressed and ignored, were finally finding their voice. They were tired of the corruption and mismanagement that had brought the country to its knees. They wanted a government that would listen to their needs and address their concerns. However, the wealthy bourgeois, who had taken the lead in the reform movement, were more interested in securing their own status and wealth than in truly representing the interests of the people. The events that followed the Battle of Poitiers and the capture of King Jean II were a turning point in French history. They exposed the deep divisions within French society and the weaknesses of the monarchy. The Third Estate, led by Etienne Marcel, had the chance to bring about real change, but their efforts were ultimately undermined by their own internal divisions and the resistance of the nobility and the clergy. The Dauphin, Charles, eventually managed to reassert his authority, but the damage had been done. The monarchy was weakened, and the seeds of future rebellion had been sown. In the end, the rebellion of the Third Estate and the Jacquerie, a peasant uprising that followed, were violently suppressed. However, the events of this period marked a significant shift in the balance of power in France. The common people had shown that they were no longer content to be passive subjects. They had tasted the power of collective action, and they would not forget it. The story of France in the years following the Battle of Poitiers is a reminder that even in the darkest of times, the human spirit can rise to challenge the most entrenched powers. It is a story of bravery, of struggle, and of the enduring hope for a better future.